Welcome to this EDUcast, UC Global Data Analytics, sponsored by Versailles and Telegram Reseller. As we usually do, we have two presenters. I'm Gary Auden, and with me today is Ross Williams, the Versailles Chief Operating Officer. And as we always do, we talk about what we're going to cover. We're talking specifically about contact centers and unified communications, the changes that are occurring, but also the opportunities they create for us. What's different now than it was, let's say, a decade ago? And how do we make those differences really count in improving our operations? So Ross, let's start with the first slide.
Well, this slide represents the traditional model, if you like, Gary. So the service provider typically sold to the customer some technology. It was largely, in the UC space anyway, it was largely hardware focused, and there was after the implementation there was a contract, typically a 3-year contract around maintenance, and that service provider provided the customer service to that customer on that basis. And that was, at the time, that was a perfectly legitimate model. And then along came cloud technologies. So, for example, in the mobile world, that might be the powered by environment or the Ready Now cloud offer that a buyer's put together. And that's changed everything. And as you can see there, that's a scalable product. And when I say scalable product, I can give you an example of a conversation I had with my father-in-law. So Richie's never seen a computer in his life. He's a retired farmer now. And he asked me what was this, what was the story with the cloud business that he was hearing everything about. And I said, Richie, you may remember when you owned a factory and you used to manufacture farm equipment, and say you were making a gate, you'd price up your pipe and your and your wires and your fixings and all the materials that went into a gate, and then you would look at how long it would take to manufacture that gate. You'd add all that pricing in, you'd put in an overhead for the factory and all the plant and equipment that you used, and then finally you'd margin that gate and off you'd sell it. Well, in the cloud business, you go through that whole sort of process once, but when you do your second gate, there's less materials and less time, and your third gate, and it gets less and less and less until when you're on your 1000th gate, there's virtually no time and materials going into it. So it's a completely different model. You also don't sell those farm gates, you rent them to your customer. So they have the ability at any time to stop that contract and start getting their farm gates off someone else. So it's a completely new model. So as the provider in that world, there's a lot of pressure upon you under that subscription or that rental model to be different and to maintain that customer. So if you're a service provider, there's a lot of challenges there. And as a customer, you have much greater expectations too. And as a service provider, of course, we want to avoid at all costs that commoditization of what we do, the price spiral. Customers have a freedom to move on, and it's great for them, and they'll take that opportunity in the cloud world to move to someone else. So this is the area that's totally new to most service providers, and the expectations of customers are driven by this as well. Different things matter. The customer success is becoming a big thing now, and I would encourage everyone to set up a customer success team, whether you're at the customer end of the deal or if you're at the supplier end, to drive that value, that business value. Those business metrics, those business conversations are more important than ever. And of course, the new metrics that everyone's looking to. Everyone's looking under the subscription model to reduce their customer churn, to drive up lifetime value, to increase the average revenue per account. And at the end of the day, monthly recurring revenue, MRR is king. That drives your business, and in fact, as a business owner, that drives the value of your business for the longer term.
Now that we have cloud-enabled capabilities, how has this changed how we operate voice communications, and does it produce any new opportunities?
Oh, well, there's whole new levels of data that are now available in these cloud environments that enables you to have the business level conversations with your customers, typically via that customer success practice. The massive data sets that we're seeing driven out of these cloud environments. Big data, of course, leads to AI. AI gets smarter and smarter and smarter, and some things that were originally even considered AI, like speech recognition, those things just become a regular part of the technology stack now and kind of fall out of the AI side. So AI keeps on moving on, on a constant basis, keeps on getting smarter and smarter. And it gives us, all these things open up opportunities for all of us. We get unprecedented insight now into these environments. And as I say, we can have those business level conversations that really matter.
Now, looking at this slide, you mentioned big data and artificial intelligence. What does that mean, and what kinds of information have you been able to capture and process with a cloud-based management service?
Well, this slide relates specifically to the site service management, and it gives you an idea of the scale of the data that we deal with. You can see there in the last month, so this is December 2019, we auto-remediated 43.4 million events via our cloud environment. We assessed well over 500 million calls for user experience. So we're talking some massive data sets, and of course that with that big data and the AI constantly learning across that with machine learning, we just get better and better at the job that we do.
Most of those listening today think of managing unified communications only on their own platforms. You're taking a global view of UC management. What does that deliver compared to what most people are used to?
So across those 12 billion individual data points that we pick up every month out of our environment, of course that gives us massive insight and the ability to do things across our customer base. So, an obvious one would be something like benchmarking. So you can benchmark your customer experience against others in the same industry vertical, or however you might want to dice and slice that data. A good example of that would be around voice quality. So via our dashboards, we let our customers know if they're if they're world class when it comes to delivering voice quality. That's dashboarded, and that's they can see that in a live environment. Things like release management, we can do a global performance across literally millions of endpoints, and we can let customers know from a release management point of view, not only where a manufacturer says they should be or what release they should be running or combinations of releases, but then they can benchmark that and look on a anonymous basis across the entire VSM base and see where they sit. So, for example, if no one seems to want to be first onto a new release, well, they can use VSM, they can look across that base and see if they do take that step, if they do roll out a piece of software, they will be the first to do that or not. They'll be able to see if that's already in production somewhere else around the world, which gives a real level of comfort to release management. And of course, we pick up not only all the performance data, but we pick up configuration data too as well. So we're able to assess based on configuration and things like network performance, what's the best configuration to run, what are the best individual settings to get the best possible result for your end users and that best possible customer experience.
I was surprised how many voice sessions use SIP, and it's so common. I thought it would be less frequent.
SIP's taking a real hold around the world, and particularly in the United States, who are leading the way. So we can see across our base, and we've published articles on this as well, as the demise of ISDN and the uptake of SIP, and the US is certainly leading the way now, and the vast majority of connections across the telco have now been replaced with SIP. The big thing that this stat points out is when we look at those SIP sessions, and we are talking again hundreds of millions of SIP sessions a month right across our base, the vast majority are only being used for voice, and that represents a lost opportunity. The types of channels that our younger demographic choose to communicate with, is not just voice, but also the other channels, the multimedia channels as well. And we can see there that the vast majority of our customers are not taking up those opportunities.
This I thought was interesting. I would think by this time most enterprises would be managing their devices well, but from what you're saying here, you learned something different.
Now, what we see from this one, Gary, is that session border controllers, they're effectively the equivalent of your firewall in the UC side. What we're seeing here is that the vast majority of session border controllers are not being treated in the same way as a firewall is. So a firewall is constantly managed by the IT team, and the rules within that firewall, if they're tested, or if the rules are missing, or if there's a problem with the configuration, that's adjusted, and that's an ongoing process. Well, in the UC world, we're not seeing the equivalent level of scrutiny placed by IT teams. They still seem to be UC kind of still seems to fall outside of the usual IT disciplines.
I would expect configuration issues to be uncommon. How did you determine that 33% of customers have an experience influenced by configuration issues?
Well, that comes down to that access to the levels of insight that have just not been possible before in the past. So what we're seeing is that from a customer experience point of view, 1/3 of customers, particularly when you're looking at things like inbound sessions to a contact center, that there are customer affecting configuration issues there that are being flagged up if you look deeply enough. And those are typically something that's really quite simple and quite straightforward to remedy. But you've got to have the right set of eyes on your technology to be able to pick these things up.
My old landline phone was great quality. Then I encountered cell phones where the quality went down a little bit. What about voice quality with IP networks?
Well, you did right there, Gary. Cellular certainly softened the blow for the introduction of IP. Once the cellular phones started rolling out all around the world, people kind of got used to reduced voice quality. They got used to calls sort of unexpectedly ending, and that kind of softened the blow for the introduction of IP. The thing is with IP, we are seeing a demise in voice quality, which is largely driven by the use of public internet. So there's more flexible workplaces, people working from home, but of course you've got a non-real-time connection between you and the enterprise network, and that's producing a few challenges. But having said that, if you've got your eyes on the right things, and you're able to benchmark your configuration against someone else's, you'll be able to see and take advantage of that sort of that global learning on how to increase that customer experience and how to improve things, because it is completely possible to do that, to tune your environments and to get a much better experience for those that are working from home.
Let's go back to that word insights. When you manage from the cloud, do you find that you can produce insights that were not available before?
The brief examples that we've provided there are the sorts of things that can spur business level conversations that can drive business and lead to increased productivity right across the board there. But you've got to have as I say, got to have the right set of eyes on your technology to be able to pick up and take these opportunities back via your customer success team back into the business, back into the customer base.
What's the best way then to manage unified communications? Because we're all dealing with it.
Well, I would say, based on our previous discussion, subscribing to a cloud-based service management platform that manages vast numbers of enterprises, like VSM, gives you access to that global data, gives you access to the benchmarking, gives you access to being able to learn from the performance of other technologies around the world. And the last thing there is to build that customer success practice. So I'm seeing increasingly around the place, you're starting to see that the titles, customer success manager, customer success director, there's no real practice in behind that to give those people a framework to work with. It's going to kind of fall short. So I would encourage everyone to build that customer success practice and formalize it and make it part of your DNA. And that's the way to succeed in the cloud subscription world.
Would you then summarize what we've learned in this EDUcast?
Well, like any new technology, we shouldn't at all be intimidated by the move to the cloud. It just opens up new opportunities for us. Customers' expectations are being driven higher, and that's great because that makes us all better at our jobs. But failure to move and failure to adopt these new practices provide these new levels of insight and have those business conversations. If you don't do that, you're going to become irrelevant pretty quickly. So let's move with it.
I'd like to point out on the next slide, there's links here to contact Versailles, also phone numbers to use over in the Americas, UK and Europe and Asia Pacific. And also point out they are going to be at Avaya Engage in February in Phoenix at booth number 412. I'd like to thank you very much for this insightful and tutorial EDUcast, Ross.
It's a pleasure as usual, Gary.